We are happy to welcome you to our Monday evening session of our VBS. We're thankful you're joining us, and we are hoping that our lessons this week will help us to appreciate the signs of Jesus in the book of John, at least the ones we're trying to cover, and the two lessons that they are intended to teach. One, Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and we want people to believe that based on the evidence. And number two, believing in Jesus as the Son of God and obeying Him will allow one to have eternal life. So we're hoping we get those two messages out of the book of John as we study together this week. Tonight I have an unenviable task. Our lesson calls for us to study 3 of the signs of healing. How in this world anybody wants you to do 3 of these lessons in one is beyond me, and doing it may be beyond me. Tonight we begin in the 4th chapter of the book of John, and we will cover in this healing sign the last paragraph of that chapter. John chapter 4, 46 through 54. Now, Jesus had been in Samaria, and there he had talked with the Samaritan woman who went into the village and told the people, "Come see a man that has told me everything I've done." And the Samaritans went out and they said, "Now we believe, not because of your word, but because we've heard him ourselves." Now in verse 46, we begin what I call the wonder at Canaan, or at Cana. The wonder at Cana, 46 through 54. In verse 46, we see the return to Cana. So Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. Now, I did not put the map up tonight, but if you look in your Bible maps, and you can find Cana, and then you can find Capernaum, you will see from where this nobleman had come, whose son was now sick. Notice you have a reference here to Cana being the beginning of the signs of Jesus, where he made water to wine. We looked at that last night. The reference here is to John chapter 2, verses 1 and 9. John 2:11 told us that this is where Jesus manifested his glory, made known his nobility. In John 2, the wedding had been a time of joy and gladness. But here in this section of John chapter 4, we record a time of jeopardy and stress. So while Jesus can go with joy and gladness and enjoy the wedding, now he's willing to deal with this kind of jeopardy and sadness or stress. In verses 46 and 47, we have the request of the nobleman. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and implored him to come down and heal his son. For his son, the text tells us, was at the point of death. The nobleman is an officer. He's a minister, generally of a prince. Arne Gingrich suggests he could be a relative of the Herodian family. We do not know that for sure, but the fact that he's a nobleman indicates he holds some kind of a position of authority. The nobleman was from Capernaum. That was approximately 20 miles from Cana. And when he left home, his son there was sick. Now that word means to be feeble, to be sick. So when he left, his son is sick. So here you have Jesus in Cana. You have the nobleman in Cana, but you have the son up at Capernaum. And he is now beseeching Jesus. The nobleman heard Jesus left Judea and came into Galilee. If you look up at verse 3 of John chapter 4, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. And now he has arrived in Galilee. Drop down to verse 54. This again is the second sign Jesus did when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. The text says that in verse 47, when he heard Jesus had came, the nobleman went to him. That word means he went off at once. He heard Jesus was there, and we would say he took right off. He took off at once to go to Jesus, and he besought him. He implored him. He requested of Jesus. He begged Jesus. And it's in a tense in the Greek language that means he didn't ask him one time. He kept on begging him to heal his son. Now, if that was your boy, wouldn't you be doing the very same thing if you thought Jesus could heal him? Help my son. Please help my son. Please help my son. And so you see the stress and the sadness of this nobleman. He's a man of position, but that did not keep him from having to deal with the problems of life. And he has a son that is very sick. Come and heal my son. Now he tells us that his son was at the point of death. And the word there means he was at the point of dying a natural death. Whatever this sickness was leading this boy to a natural death. Now I want you to notice something. This nobleman is requesting physical help. I want you to do something physically. That's his request from Jesus. Keep that in mind. In verse 46, or 48 rather, we have the reply of Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, unless you, if you're reading King James, American Standard, you have unless you see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. Now, if that's all we had and we didn't dig a little deeper in the well, we would think Jesus was addressing the nobleman. But the word you there is plural. And that's why the New King James added in italics, you people. Unless all of you, people are around, and Jesus is saying, unless all of you, unless these people see signs. Now, sign is an unusual occurrence that transcends the common nature or the common course of nature. So unless you see these signs that transcend nature, do something nature cannot do, and wonders, something so strange as to cause it to be watched, to cause it to be observed, a miracle. In the New Testament, it is found only in the plural, unless you folks see wonders. And it's joined with signs. So mark down this idea. unless you people see signs and wonders, you will not in any way, you will not in any wise. Now that's a strong negative. It says, no, you will not in any way. And this points to the stubborn refusal of the people of Israel to accept Jesus as the Messiah. And notice he says, unless you people see signs and wonders, you will not what? You will not believe. Now, he is addressing these people from the fact that they have their Bibles. They have the Old Testament that had pointed toward the Messiah, that had told them what the Messiah would be and do, and Jesus fit every one of that criteria, and here he is, and they've rejected him. John 1, 11 and 12. So Jesus says, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. Now we know from John 20, 30 and 31, the two lessons that we are to learn from the signs in the book of John, that signs and wonders, or the miraculous, was intended to produce belief among unbelievers. So Jesus says that's the only way you will believe. Go back to John 2 and look at verse 23. Now, when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover during the feast, many believed in his name when they saw what? The signs which he did. King James uses miracles there, right? The New King James, signs. When they saw the signs, that's the word, Simeon. They saw the signs which he did. Now there's an emphasis on the word believe in this section of Scripture. Now look here at verse 48. Except you see signs and wonders, you will in no wise believe. Look down to verse 50. Jesus said to him, go your way, your son lives. So the man believed. Drop down to verse 54, 53. So the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Jesus said to him, your son lives, and he himself believed, and his whole household. Throw in these short verses 3 times, the idea of believe is brought out. So here we are stressing belief. Belief. Now, is belief physical? Belief is spiritual. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of the Christ. Romans 10:17. So Jesus said, you won't believe that I am the Messiah. But he was a spiritual Messiah, not a physical one. He was a spiritual helper, not a physical one. He didn't come to cure all the ills of society. He only used the signs to bring people to belief. Jesus' emphasis is on spiritual health more than physical health. And it's important for people to believe in Jesus because of who he is and what he is, not just because he performed the signs. You see, national Israel had the scriptures that identified Jesus as the Messiah, and yet they refused to accept him because his emphasis was spiritual and not physical and political. They wanted a political deliverer. His emphasis was spiritual. He came to set up a spiritual kingdom, not a physical one. So they rejected him. National Israel asked for signs and then refused to learn the lessons connected with them. People ask for signs, but the signs are there to teach a lesson. They don't want the lesson. Turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. And look at verse 22. For the Jews, King James here, require. The Jews require, the Jews request a sign, and Greeks seek after wisdom. If you study Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they will say to Jesus, what sign will you do for us that we may believe? Now, when Jesus had made that statement in verse 49, you have the renewed request of the nobleman. The nobleman said to him, you have Lord. Correct? Sir. Now, that's Kyrie, so that's the same word that would be translated Lord. Sir, come down before my child dies. First of all, this man showed respect for Jesus. Sir. That's an address of respect. Second, he showed concern for his child. Come down, ere or before my child dies. Now think about that. He had heard about Jesus. He had heard that Jesus could heal. He came requesting that Jesus help his son, but he evidently believed Jesus had to be physically present with the son in order to help his child. And if the child died, it seems he thought Jesus could not help him. So his entire emphasis is on the physical. Come down where my boy is. Heal my boy. You have to go to him. In verse 50, you have the response of Jesus. Jesus said to him, go your way, your son lives. So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went his way. Go your way. He said, your son lives. That is, his son was living then, and his son would not die from that ailment. Jesus told him that. This shows that Jesus is the master of distance and disease. He did not have to be physically present to heal this boy. He can heal disease without being there. This man's idea was physical. Jesus said, go your way. Your son's alive now, and he will not die from this ailment. So beginning verse 50 down through verse 53, you have the return of the nobleman. The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went his way. Now, put an emphasis here. The man believed the word. That's revelation. Jesus revealed to this man that his son was then living and would not die from that malady. The man believed the revelation Jesus gave him. And this word believe here means to trust in God or in Jesus, to be able to aid. They have the ability to aid. He believed from what Jesus said that Jesus had the ability to aid him. Now notice, he believed the word of Jesus without a sign or a wonder having been performed in his presence. And so he goes his way back to Capernaum. In verse 51, as he was now going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, your son lives. All right, Jesus spoke. The man believed. Jesus was able to aid him. On that revelation, he returned home. And as he was returning home, a bondslave met him and said, "Your son lives." He's recovered. Verse 52, the nobleman asked this question. Then he inquired of these bondslaves the hour when he got better. "When did my son get better?" And they said to him, "Yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him." That's 7 p.m. Roman time. Yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him. Now wait a minute. It's only 25 miles from Cana to Capernaum. He talked with Jesus this day, and on the next day, he's returning home. Does that maybe indicate he trusted Jesus' word so implicitly that he did not return home immediately? Whatever happened, the nobleman's faith is strengthened when his servants tell him this. And when they told him, yesterday it's the 7th hour, so the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Jesus said to him, "Your son lives." Notice an emphasis here on hour. Yes, last night we had an emphasis on Jesus' hour. My hour has not yet come. Here we have an emphasis on the hour of healing. At what hour did this boy get better? Yesterday at 7 p.m., his fever left him. Now, what's the result? Verse 53, and he himself believed, and his whole house. All right? You have the signs and the wonders. You have the healing of the boy. Now you have the confirmation of the word of Jesus. Jesus said, "Your son lives." The result of that was faith on the part of the nobleman and on the part of his household. Now this may very likely mean this caused the nobleman and his household to come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Now, confirmation of the revelation. Turn to John 20. The lessons we're trying to learn from the signs this week. John 20, 30, and 31. And truly, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, the book of John. But these are written that in order that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. Now, since his household believed, that implies the nobleman informed his whole household about what had taken place at Cana. So the nobleman became an evangelist. You think you'd tell anybody what happened to make your son well? And then in verse 54, we have the relationship of the signs. This again is the second sign Jesus did when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. So this sign showed the importance of accepting the word of Christ and obeying the word of Christ, acting on that word. He went back home and checked on his son. So here you have the healing of the nobleman's son. And the nobleman came to believe in Jesus because of what Jesus told him and because it was confirmed. Now, do you have questions or comments on the healing of the nobleman's son? All right, we move then to chapter 5. And in chapter 5, we have a man that is lame that's going to be healed. In chapter 5 of the book of John, the Son, Jesus, and the Jews are contrasted in their relation to God. And from this relation to God, the Son and the Jews, we trace the origin of unbelief. What brings about unbelief? We can see it in this chapter. Chapter 5 is beginning of Christ's prophetic teaching. He unfolds here the nature of his work and of his person. In answer to the first accusation the Jews brought before some authoritative body concerning him. It's not a popular discourse, one writer said, but the outline of a systematic defense. John is the only writer to record this sign. So in verse 1, we have a feast in Jerusalem. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Some manuscripts read the feast, which, if you go to chapter 2, verse 13, you have reference to a particular feast. The Passover of the Jews was at hand, and this may very well be a Passover feast. We don't know that. But the fact that some manuscripts had the definite article in it, the feast, may point to that. Now, if this was one of the 3 annual feasts, Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles, then Jesus going up to the feast would be an example of Jesus obeying the law of Moses under which he lived. Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 16. The males were to appear in Jerusalem for these feasts. So you have the feast in Jerusalem. Also in verses 1 to 15, you have 5 porches in Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. A pool, a place for diving, a swimming pool, a reservoir, a pool that was used for bathing. That's what that word means. It could apply to any of those things. In Jerusalem. Verse 2 tells us it's by the sheep gate. Now, I won't take time to do this, but in your study, you need to go back to Nehemiah chapter 3 and look at the rebuilding of the wall and the building of the sheep gate. Chapter 3, verse 1 and verse 32 of Nehemiah. Its Hebrew name, John tells us, is Bethesda. You may have Bethzatha in your margin, or some even read it Bethsaida. And it has 5 porches. A porch was a covered colonnade where people could walk protected from the weather and the heat of the sun. And John tells us there were 5 there. This detail, one writer said, is strikingly confirmed by recent excavations near the temple, revealing a pool with 5 porticos with inscriptions suggesting the healing properties of the water. Verse 3, in these 5 porches, lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. It's a gathering place for the sick people. They lay there. It means to lie outstretched. They would lie down outstretched in these porches. The word sick here means to be weak, to be feeble. It talks specially of debility and health. So here are sick folks. Here are ailing ones, blind, halt, or lame, and withered. They were waiting for the agitation of the water. And the water moved when an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped into the pool after the angel stirred up the water was made well of his disease. Now, some manuscripts do not contain the latter part of verse 3 and verse 4. The oldest and best omit what the Textus Receptus behind the King James adds here. But whatever the case, if an angel went down and stirred up the water, that's all we know about it. We'll have to get to heaven to get more detail. But in verse 5 we learn, now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. This man lying by this pool had been sick for 38 years. And this man's sickness was known to everybody around because of his continual presence at the pool. Now you need to get that lesson. This is not just one man thrown in here and all of a sudden he's healed and somehow some magic has been performed. You couldn't pull the wool over these people's eyes. They'd seen this, and they knew this man had been sick for 38 years, and they knew he had been at this pool trying to get in to the agitated waters. So you have a pool in Jerusalem. In verses 6 through 9, you have a physician in Jerusalem. Verse 6 says, when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he already had been in that condition a long time, he said to him, do you want to be made well? Do you want to be made sound in body? Now, what would you have said? In verse 7, you have the man's reply. The sick man answered him, Sir, do you have sir there? I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me. Sir, Curie, Lord, I don't have a helper here. When the water's troubled, when the water's agitated, I don't have anyone to put me into the pool, implying I can't get there by myself. Would you say this man was helpless? It's not easy to admit we're helpless, is it? Any of you have a problem admitting you need help? Admitting you're helpless? You see, without Jesus to deal with the sin problem, we're helpless spiritually. We cannot be made whole from sin by ourselves. But national Israel never learned this lesson. And I'll just give you the text and let you study it. Luke 18, verses 9 through 14. Spiritual Israel never learned the lesson they could not heal themselves from sin by themselves. Now, the man said, I'm helpless because I don't have a helper. Now notice this. When Jesus came to this man, he now had a helper. But he would be helped in a much different way than what he thought. He told Jesus that while he was coming to the pool, someone stepped down into the pool before him, notice the first one in, and was healed. Notice this man desired to be whole. Notice this man was doing everything he knew to do to be whole. He was at the place of healing, but he could not reach the cure. You remember Jesus will say to a man, you are not far from the kingdom of heaven. But being close to the kingdom of heaven does not mean you're in it. Being close to the pool didn't mean the man was in it. He's close to the remedy, but he couldn't reach it. So in verses 8 and 9, you have the restoration of his health. Jesus said to him, rise, take up your bed and walk. And do you have immediately? Immediately, the man was made well, made whole, made sound, took up his bed and walked. Arise, take up your bed and go on walking. It's a present tense verb there. Get up. Make up your bed, take it up. He's lying on a pallet. And go on walking. Notice, Jesus is dealing with a man who could not get himself into the pool. Yet Jesus didn't say, get into the pool. Jesus said, get up and walk. And Jesus' command was a test of his faith. He had not walked in 38 years. Jesus didn't say, I'll help you in the pool. Help you into the pool. Jesus said, get up, take up, and go on walking. And here Jesus became the master of time. The man had been sick 38 years. Immediately, that's the key word, the man was made whole, took up his bed, and went on walking. Do you notice what the man did not say in reply to Jesus? That most of us probably would have said. Anything come to mind? What? I can't. Get up, take up, and go on. Oh, I can't. I can't. He didn't say that. And you need to understand spiritually, there are no problems that grace cannot save when coupled with our obedience. Notice this man had to obey Jesus to be able to go on walking. He didn't anticipate failure. When you learn faith in the Bible, you learn that faith is optimistic and says, I can do it, not I can't do it. Now, what did this man have upon which to base his faith that would cause him to get up, take up, and go on walking? What did he have? What kind of evidence did he have? Upon what basis did he get up, take up, and go on walking? Let me see if I can help you. He got up by what? Faith. What did he have? Upon what basis did he get up, take up and go on walking. No, that's what he did. Upon what basis did he obey?
He heard Jesus' word.
Ah, yeah, the word. That word produced faith, because faith comes by hearing the word of the Christ, Romans 10:17. That's all he had. Jesus didn't do anything physically to convince him. Jesus said, arise, take up your bed, and go on walking. Now this underscores two things: the deity of Jesus and the authority of his word. Now notice this. This man had been a burden to others. Now he could help others. He had his burden lifted. But grace is not selfish. Grace relieves me so I can relieve other people. Now, you have all these people who've seen this man. Some of them may have seen him there for 38 years. This sign could not be disputed because they knew this man had been crippled, been lame for 38 years. So when the physician came to Jerusalem, this man was healed. But now in verses 9 through 15, you have a problem in Jerusalem. Verse 9 says, it was and that day was the Sabbath. It was on Saturday. Under what law are they living? The law of Moses. By this time, the Jews had placed a lot of restrictions on the Sabbath that the law did not place on it. So when you get to verse 10, the Jews therefore said to him who was cured, it is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed. Now it was not lawful, not according to the law of Moses, but according to their tradition. In Nehemiah's day, Nehemiah chapter 13, and verse 19, Nehemiah 13 and verse 19, so it was at the gates of Jerusalem as it began to be dark before the Sabbath, that I commanded the gates to be shut and charged that they must not be opened till after the Sabbath. Then I posted some of my servants at the gates so that no burdens would be brought in on the Sabbath day. These people were trying to still keep on trading and doing their business on the Sabbath day. The law did forbid that. So Nehemiah said, I shut the gates and prohibited that, but he did not prohibit what this man did. That was their tradition. So the healed man answered them. He answered them, he who made me well said to me, take up your bed and walk. I'm just doing what the man who healed me told me to do. Then they asked him, who is the man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? Now notice his answer. My favorite coordinating conjunction. But the one who was healed did not know who it was. For Jesus hath withdrawn, a multitude being in that place. Jesus had taken himself away from that place. And a multitude stood where Jesus had been. Now you think about that. These Jews knew that man had been lame for 38 years. They knew he was now walking, and all they could do was accuse him of breaking their tradition. Big-hearted people, aren't they? Really happy this man no longer is lame. That doesn't even enter into it. You're violating tradition on the Sabbath. It's not lawful according to our tradition for you to do that. Verse 14, afterward Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, see, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. Sin no more. No longer go on sinning. So here we learn there was some kind of connection between the condition of the man and the conduct of the man. His being lame may have been the consequence of a sinful lifestyle. And Jesus used the same language of this man that he used with the woman in John 8, verse 11, caught in adultery. Go and don't go on sinning. And Jesus said, if you go back to sinning, something worse will befall you. So verse 15, the man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Now in verses 16 to 29, you have fierce persecution in Jerusalem. And you have in 16 to 18 a confrontation between Jesus and the Jews. And this is the beginning of the conflict that you'll see unfold in the book of John between Jesus and the Jews. Verse 16 tells us that the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him because he did these things on the Sabbath day. These religious people were not in the least concerned about the man being healed. They were concerned about their traditions being kept. And then Jesus begins. You remember yesterday morning I told you that most of the signs in John had a discourse that followed them that explained the miracle. I don't have time to cover it tonight. But beginning at verse 17, Jesus told these Jews the working of his Father and his working, and showed them their unbelief. Now, unbelief came about because the Jews rejected the word of the Son because of their tradition. They put their tradition above the word of the Son of God. And that's how unbelief comes about today. I feared, as the old timers used to say, I was afeared I wouldn't get to John 9, and my fears are realized. Thank you for listening. Oh, did I tell you tomorrow night the lesson be John 6 and the parallels in Matthew, Mark, and Luke if you want to study ahead?